Okay, so, Overcooked is one of my favorite series over the last couple years. I love the frenetic pace, and multitasking with ever-growing variables to balance, pushing my brain to the absolute limits trying to keep a semblance of efficiency. And while admittingly exhausting, is also some of the most exciting and enjoyable gameplay ever offered. And really, cooking games as a whole somehow are the perfect breeding ground for pushing limits. Cook Serve Delicious 3, my introduction to the series, definitely has no problem being that frantic cooking game. While the genre is a little hard to nail down, referring to it as an action per minute tester is an apt description, which on one hand feels odd. When I think of high APM games, RTSs are always the forefront of my mind. Yet I have to look around at the modern gaming landscape and the state of the RTS genre, or more accurately, the lack of. APM-style gameplay is always going to be sought after, so something had to fill that gameplay void. CSD3 has you playing a chef in a post-apocalyptic world. Something, headquarters blown up, something, start over at the bottom with a food truck. Nice. There's probably some story tie-in to previous games, but really, it makes little difference. All you need to know is each level is a different route, with different numbers of stops, and with different menu requirements. There are two types of menu items, holding station and special order. Simply put, holding station food are pre-made batches, while the special order are one-offs, and will need prepared separately each time. Now admittingly, the maker's choice between what fell into each category can definitely feel arbitrary, but we're not going to dwell on why Rice Krispie treats can't be made in batches. At the start of each day, you will be tasked with curating a menu for each route. You will be required to have a specific number of each holding station and special order recipes. Each of these menu items will have a corresponding point value, from 0 to 5, based on its difficulty to make. The higher the point value though, the bigger the multiplier at the end of the route, and more money and experience made. As you progress, routes will also have other variables, like limited recipe choices, higher menu point requirements, and also bigger menus. Now, I definitely found certain recipes to be far easier than others, even when they had the same point value. And sometimes, mixing in higher point items was actually easier than going for the lowest point values possible. For example, chicken strips and chicken nuggets would overlap in my brain, and I wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two of them. Or things like chili versus stew where a lot of the ingredients overlap. I would try to avoid taking both of these on the same run. The difficulty of each menu item was based on a few different variables. Longer cook times were considered more difficult. More ingredients were generally also considered more difficult. Ingredient variation was more difficult than consistent patterns, and also if the recipe took more than one step to complete, like a cook and then add toppings recipe. For me, the hardest part was remembering what key each ingredient was on the keyboard. And what makes this so difficult is realizing the first letter of an ingredient isn't always the correct key, because multiple ingredients share the same first letter. Carrot is almost always A instead of C, and onion is almost always N, and chicken is K. And while I was able to train my brain largely for consistent letters, then there was the ingredients that changed keys. Potato would be the letter P for one recipe, but then O for another. Celery would change between C and E. Actually, E shared ingredients across recipes frequently, being peas in one recipe and green beans in another, on top of being celery. Or, and this is when my mind would sometimes just break, having multiple pages of ingredients, which could share letters. Pages were color-coded to differentiate between where an ingredient should be, but that was also only so helpful when the ingredient on page 3 was still an odd letter. As I started having to make harder menus, I found myself picking recipes that might take more key presses, but were consistent, and recipes that only had one step to make. I would gladly take tiramisu's 8 consistent keystrokes, but was then complete, over oatmeal's 2 steps, 1 to cook, then 1 to serve with its 3 topping variables. Even ratatouille's 24 consistent ingredients was preferable to most 2-step dishes for me. In practice though, there would only be so many recipes per route for that strategy. So I would try to balance having longer pattern recipes with more variable but less keystrokes. Variables can be surprisingly time-consuming, because you need to actively think about what is being made. And when the game gets going, being able to make something by muscle memory allows you to keep more focus towards the more demanding items. There are upgrades to unlock, as you will receive experience levels as you complete routes. And while the additional holding bins only make life easier, the extra serving stations could sometimes be a punishment. There is the benefit of being able to serve more food at once, so the holding stations don't spoil, but this also means more special orders between stops. And in the case of the two-step cook then finish orders, the more of those on screen at a time. I found when I was forced to do more of the two-stepper recipes, I would actually turn off the extra serving stations, because customers only start getting mad about how long their food takes to make after they order it. So keeping them queued is actually easier. There's also the benefit for each extra serving station taken. The daily menu point requirement will also be lowered by 1, so you get to decide what kind of challenge is more fitting for you as a player. Another game mechanic that can also be a punishment is the auto-serve button. Hit the button and your robot companions will serve up all the food that is ready, instead of making you click through each order individually. And this feels really awesome when you are heavily stocked on food, clearing entire screens at once. But this is also a double-edged sword in the same way as the extra serving stations are. Sometimes you will need to slow down the serving so you don't get overwhelmed by too many customers ordering at once. And speaking of your two robot companions,
my girl robot.
Whisk and Cleaver's banter at the end of a route can be pretty amusing. Whisk, the driver, has the friendly, saccharine type of personality, where she is always nice, but at times it is pandering. Where Cleaver is more of the tough exterior type that comes across harsher than she has to be, just for image sake. Are they heavily on the odd couple trope side? Sure, but I did audibly laugh at the banner a few times. I had to find some sort of complaint, so how about fat fingering? It would be nice to be able to remake a specialty order that you know you screwed up. Now, a lot of this problem falls on my not learning to type the number keys well, and the major one is I'm still not sure which hand is supposed to be used for 6. And because of my lack of top row number knowledge, I would regularly fat finger the numbers, hitting an extra key I didn't want to, and then ruining a perfect run undercooking something. I mean, sure, this falls under the get good fix, but still, if I am willing to sacrifice the keystrokes to remake something, I should have the option to bury myself in work later because of it. After 10 hours of gameplay, Cook Serve Delicious 3 gets high grades from me. I appreciate that the game is built to be difficult, and if it is ever too easy for you, it allows plenty of customization to make it more your speed. And really, I think this is where the game shines the most. The variety of menu items, from manageable to challenging, to forcing you to just react because you don't have time to actually think. And that is about as good of an APM masher you can ask for. If you need some reinforcement on learning your typing skills, this is a great way to increase your GWOM. Or you could just use a controller, where the buttons are always in the same place, and make things 10 times easier. But why would you trade out the masochism and bragging rights of having to type out non-words and remembering the letter that doesn't make any sense for the ingredient? Maybe I just have a problem. Thanks for watching.